Hello and welcome into the 247 Sports College Football Show. I'm Cooper Petagna. That's 247 Sports Director of Scouting, Andrew Ivins. And Drew, I think last week we had our first show here on the network. We're excited about it, but we just jumped right into the content. And I said, hold on, we didn't really explain either of our backgrounds as we go through this 1 hour show getting ready for fall camp, the college football season. And then I thought, wait, I had the perfect explainer. You're the guy that grades all the 2027s, the guys that haven't even played their sophomore tape yet. Drew, the director of scouting, 8 years of experience at 247 Sports. He's covered Florida, the Southeast, also did some time covering the Notre Dame Fighting Irish as well. A little background on me: 7 years in college football player personnel, stops at Oregon, Washington, Michigan, probably your favorite school along the way. Drew, is that a pretty good, I don't know, what do you call it? Just kind of like quick one-liner on both our backgrounds.
Coop, I think you nailed it, right? And I pulled up the CBS Sports, my writer bio the other week, and it says that I watch future NFL players on Friday nights. I think that's pretty fitting. I don't even know if I wrote that, but it fits to a T. And hey, how about a mission statement for the show, right? This is college football through the lens of two guys that watch these kids start as freshmen in high school all the way up into the NFL draft. We are experts when it comes to personnel, the inner workings of the NCAA, because you used to do it. Hey, this is the guy that built the roster for Michigan and Washington last year. He had a big hand in that. So, Coop, I'm ready to get this thing rolling.
Thanks, buddy. You're making me blush. All right, well, let's get right to it. Two significant injuries in the SEC and two guys that were ranked 5 stars in 2023, the only two ranked at their position that high in the top 32. Big losses for Cedric Baxter Jr. as he tore both his ACL and his PCL in his right knee last year, and then got some devastating news yesterday. If you're a Texas A&M fan, Rueben Owens, the former 5 star as well, will also be out with a season's ending lower extremity injury. Drew, I guess I will phrase the question to you: the bigger blow, Texas A&M, or the boosters that are paying these guys money for the next year and a half?
Coop, you're stealing my notes here. Yeah, I think the biggest blow is the people that are tied up financially in these two. And Cooper, we always talk about positional value. You look towards the NFL and some of these big stars, Saquon Barkley, and the contracts they're looking for. Well, here's the reality when it comes to college football. These game-changing running backs, like a Cedric Baxter, like a Rueben Owens, and I know fans only got a small sample size of them last year when they were true freshmen. Both of them got their feet wet, were behind some upperclassmen, but they were supposed to be the guys here in 2024 in the SEC. So you look at the financial investment, because we know name, image, and likeness is a real thing. Cedric Baxter, Rueben Owens, they are pacing to be three-and-done guys, meaning they're going to play 3 years of college football, and then they're off to the NFL. Now, if you're Texas A&M, you're Texas, you're only really going to get a season and a half out of them, assuming they come back perfectly fine from injury. I think with modern medicine, we can expect that. So it's crippling for them. But now when you dig into this, right, who is it more of a blow to? Cooper, I think it's Texas, right? And I know they return some production at the position, but you look at Steve Sarkisian and what he's been able to build there in Austin. Cedric Baxter would have been a nice luxury to have in terms of what he brings to the table. He's a big north-south running back. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. Jonathan Brooks is gone off to the NFL. Now they're going to have to turn to Jadon Blue and potentially another true freshman from the Sunshine State and Jarrett Gibson. So I'm going to go bigger blow for Texas, but I think if you're Texas A&M, there's reason to be concerned as well.
The more I studied this, the more I felt like, okay, this could be a little bit more of an impact to the Longhorns in Austin than it could be to Texas A&M. And I think on paper, when you look at it immediately, I think your eyes kind of gravitate toward A&M and the Aggies and Mike Elko and how are they going to backfill, not the production, because if you look at the production in Texas A&M's backfield, Rueben Owens was the third leading rusher. C.J. Baxter, as a freshman, was the leading rusher outside of Jonathan Brooks, right? So now you return a guy like Jaden Blue. Trey Wisner, Drew, is really kind of the name that comes up and is a little bit more of a focal point. A guy that was a special teams ace, really as a freshman, only had 12 touches last year in the running game. What can he give you on the ground? You mentioned Jarrett Gibson, Drew, and I think it's important to really kind of add to the conversation In terms of Jared Gibson, the number 3 ranked back, according to 247 Sports last cycle, he's one of the most physically ready to play backs in the country. I think he can give you some snaps, maybe anywhere from 8 to 10 a game, but I think it's going to have to be really complimentary. Where does Christian Clark kind of fit in there? But Drew, on the other side, how about Texas A&M, right? You lose 5-star Rueben Owens, but you got guys like Lavian Moss, you got guys like Amari Daniels as well. You bring over the son of Hall of Famer Emmitt Smith, E.J. Smith from Stanford. I'm going back, digging into the tape this morning, and what kind of turned out to be a little bit of dread and misery looking at Texas A&M and their outlook in the running game. I ended up getting really, really excited about the prospect of a guy like Lavian Moss and Amari Daniels. I think those two are going to flip-flop. I think Amari Daniels is going to end up being the guy that's going to be a little bit more of a change of pace guy, rushed for over 500 yards last year. And then I think Lavian Moss is going to be the guy that you're going to see on first and second down that really could have a career year in Colin Klein's offense. Drew, I get really fired up about that. And then you bring in E.J. Smith. Thank goodness they did that. But you got the parachute there in that running game. You look at all three guys last year who they had, Lavian Moss, Amari Daniels, Rueben Owens. All of those guys had 96-plus rushing attempts, with the most being at 105. Drew, the transfer portal, the importance of the transfer portal, I guess we can go into this. But the fact that Texas A&M has E.J. Smith, they have another guy that's experienced. Now you look at a really complimentary group to begin with. I get more excited, and I think it's going to be a big year for Lavian Moss.
Yeah, Coop, and E.J. Smith might turn into one of the most important transfers of the entire cycle, right? Of all these veterans that have come in, a guy that was dinged up at Stanford, you said it, NFL bloodlines. What stands out to me is his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. And you look at what Mike Elko did when he was at Duke and that new offensive coordinator, Colin Klein, when he was at Kansas State. They didn't just, use one workhorse of a running back. It was a by-committee approach. That's why I think Texas A&M is in better shape here, maybe than Texas, in terms of, okay, we can figure it out as the season progresses. You mentioned Amari Daniels, Coop. You know what stands out to me? And I think he's a guy everyone's going to be watching week 1 when they take on Notre Dame. Amari Daniels is a kid from South Florida. He is someone that has been running away from defenders since the youth leagues. He's a tough individual. Might not be the biggest ball carrier, but he's low to the ground, and he's got that breakaway speed, very creative at the second level. So I like it for Texas A&M. And you're right, Lavian Moss, Amari Daniels, E.J. Smith, they all kind of complement each other. It's like they have built kind of a little basketball team in terms of you got some size, you got different skill sets. Shouldn't be much of an issue for Texas A&M. I think what really stings is, Rueben Owens was a potential game changer, and we thought that given where we ranked him.
Tinfoil hat? Are we going to see Arch Manning in the short yardage game, in the running game for Texas? I don't think so. I think they're in a pretty good spot there. Some big injury blows in the SEC. Some more SEC talk right after this break. It's the middle of fall camp, which means it's time to overreact, Drew. It usually gets about 2-3 weeks in when you start looking at a couple of these freshmen, you start reading the camp reports, and it's like, it's time for this guy. He's starting to turn some heads. And then sometimes it plays out the way you think it's going to play out, sometimes not. But Drew, the guy turning heads right now in Tuscaloosa, 5-star receiver, Ryan Williams. What an interesting case that he is, because if you know anything about Ryan Williams, or you've been following recruiting, or you're a huge Crimson Tide fan, a lot of expectations attached to this young man, but he's different in the fact that, well, he's 17 and he should be a senior in high school, yet he's going to be playing this fall for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And Drew, they desperately need him. This is a receiving core that lost 67 starts. I mean, you go down the list: Jermaine Burton off to the NFL, Isaiah Bond off to Austin, Ja'Cory Brooks to Louisville, Malik Benson to Florida State. There is a lot of talent, a lot of production that they have to replace there in Tuscaloosa. Enter Ryan Williams. Drew, the more and more you read about this kid, it sounds like he is going to play early, not only play early, be a factor early. Are you surprised by this at all when it comes to Ryan Williams?
Well, first off, can they get a better clip of him? I want to overreact to him slipping there on the comeback route. Am I surprised, Cooper? Yes and no. You mentioned the reclassification, right? And this is something that we have seen in the world of college basketball. That has kind of been the norm. Guys jumping classes, getting to college early. And now we're seeing it in college football. Why? Name, image, and likeness. These kids want to ensure that they are being taken care of from a financial standpoint as soon as they can. I'm not saying that's what played into Ryan Williams' decision, but Cooper, there are not a ton of success stories when we talk about these guys that have reclassified. Braylon Allen, the former Wisconsin running back, he's the first reclassified non-quarterback to be selected in the NFL draft. That was a few months ago. Sonny Styles at Ohio State will probably be next. I'm already ready to put Ryan Williams in that category. Go back to his recruitment. I mean, he had an electric senior or junior season there in the Yellowhammer State, right? We got to see him at some of these all-star games. And the big question for us is, physically, he isn't the biggest guy. If you're looking for a body type of composition, someone he reminds us of, I think you could put Devontae Smith in there, right? On the slender side, but he's very, very explosive. And when we saw him in a best-on-best setting against guys that were older than him, he passed the test at the Alabama-Mississippi game, at the Under Armour game. So, no, I am not surprised. And I think if you're an Alabama fan, you need to be all in on Ryan Williams because we know Kalen DeBoer, he wants to throw it around. Last year at Washington, he had 3 future NFL wide receivers. Ryan Williams is certainly a name to know. We talk about Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State, Cam Coleman down the road at Auburn. I think you can put Ryan Williams in that elite category of true freshman wide receivers that are going to make an impact here this fall.
And let's not assume anything, right? To the audience, bringing Ryan Williams to the forefront, Jeremiah Smith is a guy that we think is a generational talent, the number 1 player in last year's cycle. Cam Coleman, just about any other year, probably would be the number 1 receiver in the country. You could say the same thing for Ryan Williams, even a guy that reclassified. You mentioned Alabama, Mississippi, the Under Armour All-American game as well. Drew, here's the thing. I mentioned the guys that Alabama has to replace at receiver. Here are the guys that they have coming back. Jeremy Bernard transfers in from Washington. You got Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice, and then you got Ryan Williams. Jalen Hale, another guy that we like that gives them a little bit of size and a little bit of speed. He's out with an injury indefinitely. Ryan Williams, I don't think really has any other choice than to be the guy. All those other guys are really nice complementary pieces and dynamic players in their own right. But you're talking about an X receiver, a guy that can play a little bit of Z as well, do all those little things. I think this dude is going to be a household name. And I guess that my last question on him, how quickly do you expect him to kind of acclimate into that status at the next level?
Oh, I'm going to throw this to you. I mean, this is a guy that was in your backyard. I would think right away. And it's because of that last evaluation we got of him in the all-star setting, right? He could have easily shelled up and have been a deer in the headlights with all these bigger, more physical corners. There wasn't any of that. He seems to be a competitor, wired the right way. I don't know. What do you think? What type of freshman season can we get from Ryan Williams? Over, under 500 yards?
I think because of the room, he's going to be over 500 yards, and I think this is going to be an offense that's going to suit him well. Obviously, you got Jalen Milroe coming back. I like that one, a little over-under, slip that in. But I think he's going to be in a unique position as a guy that's reclassified to be able to really kind of handle himself. I think the biggest question mark with Ryan Williams, Drew, a guy that's supposed to be a senior in high school, can he deal with the physicality and the demands of the SEC? That's going to be the biggest question mark. I expect him to get off to a head start. Let's stick with the Crimson Tide and Drew, a guy that I'm excited to talk about with you because I know you love this kid throughout the entire recruiting process. Let's talk about Zabien Brown, another former 5-star. If there is a question mark on this Alabama team, it's their defensive backfield. Not a lot of experience there, a lot of youth coming in. Zabien Brown, Jalen Mbakwe, Zay Mincy, 3 guys that were 5-stars. You bring in Damani Jackson, also from USC as well, another highly touted player. Zabien Brown, Drew, let me read you this quote via Mike Rodak at Bama 247 from Kalen DeBoer. He just doesn't feel like a freshman out there. He does not. I don't think of him as young or anything like that. I think of him as a guy that's just fitting into the defense, and I'm proud of the way he approaches it. He doesn't take anything for granted. He works his tail off. He's up there with Coach Mo nonstop, and he's just a fun guy to have around each day in the program. I have a lot of trust in him already. There's not many more flattering things you can hear about an 18-year-old freshman than what Kalen DeBoer just said about Zabien Brown.
Coop, over the weekend playing some golf. I was on the tee box, backed up, so I was going through the Twitter feed and I saw that those comments from Kalen DeBoer, and I just smiled to myself. I was not surprised. Zabien Brown, I think what always stands out to me about him in the evaluation process, go to winter 2 years ago. He flew across the country to try out for the South Florida Express. That is, one of the top 7-on-7 organizations. And, they have all the elite defensive backs. That is what South Florida is known for. I remember Zabien Brown going through drills, and I said, this is the best kid here. Fast forward a year later, and he's at a 7-on-7 tournament. Same thing. I thought he was the most technically advanced corner. I stood on the table behind the scenes for months saying, we got to get this guy a 5th star. We got to get this guy a 5th star. It didn't happen until after the All-American Bowl. But I love the length. I think he is fast enough, and just the footwork, his ability to maintain phase, flip his hips. Is he going to have a Caleb Downs type of season at Alabama? I don't know. I think that's a little bit lofty of expectations, but this is a guy that I think is going to potentially be a multi-year all-SEC type of talent. He can shut down one side of the field. Coop, I'll never forget at the All-American Bowl either. He was a late arrival. And Hudson Standish on our scouting team, he wasn't at check-in. I went up to Zabien. I'm like, we need to measure your arm length, right? We need to make sure you meet the thresholds. We can give you that 5th star. Turns out over 32 inches. And the other thing from San Antonio, one of the only guys that could cover Jeremiah Smith.
The all-important arm length. If he didn't have it, we never would have known. Would he be starting for Alabama? We don't know. But had a big spring, big fall camp. He's picked up the momentum. Zabien Brown, named to know. Hey, Drew, we're a Big Ten company here. We got to talk some Big Ten. Let's start with Wisconsin. Got a lot of Badgers in the rundown today. But one of those guys that is really starting to make some noise in Madison. How about Kevin Haywood, top 50 player in the top 247 last year, the number 4 offensive tackle. You and I were talking about it before the show. He just kind of shot up like a rocket, Drew. And you think about everything that he brings to the table. Well, how about that size, right? 6'6 plus 299 pounds. That was at the All-American Bowl in January. 34 7/8 arms. That is long for the tackle position. 10-inch hands. He's a nasty dude. Remember, he went viral there in San Antonio, throwing one of those poor defenders on the ground. Drew, he is getting reps at the starting right tackle position. He's been working with the twos on the left side. You start to kind of put the pieces together a little bit. It sounds like Kevin Haywood is going to play for the Badgers this season.
Yeah, I think there's 2 ways to look at this, Cooper. Number one, if you're kind of a Wisconsin fan, I'd be a little bit concerned about Kevin Haywood. I mean, Wisconsin, known for their offensive tackle play. There's a lot of big bodies up where they're from. They usually bring these guys in and redshirt them. So, where are the individuals ahead of him? The other side of the coin, Kevin Haywood, wow. I mean, I thought he was someone that was going to be a slower burn, right? 2-3 years. You look at him, he's very lean, especially in the lower half. But you said it, he's aggressive. So the fact that he's kind of breaking through and pushing to be the team's potential 6th offensive lineman or even a starter, that's a sign, a good sign of things to come there in Wisconsin. I love what Luke Fickell has been doing on the recruiting trail. They continue to add talent. I think they do an excellent job of evaluating. Kevin Haywood, you said it. He was a 3-star prospect for us, shows up at the All-American Bowl, the biggest riser out of anyone there, finishes number 50, number 4 offensive tackle. Reason to be excited about him, I think, if you're a Wisconsin fan, just the fact that he's in the mix right now.
Thank goodness for the All-American Bowl. One last opportunity to get it right. Wisconsin, they're also fired up about freshman running back Darian Dupree. We like Dylan Jones. We thought that was going to be the guy. Still wait and see mode, but Darian Dupree, also a guy getting a lot of attention as well. All right, Drew. Penn State, Cooper Cousins, awesome article that came out about this young man, one of the top interior offensive linemen in the country last year, and a guy that was in the top 64 for us, the number 2 IOL. He can play center, but he's 6'6" plus. He's hovering around 300 pounds. I made a call up to Penn State last night, and they just raved about this guy and his work ethic, his position flexibility. They said that this was one of the easiest recruitments that they've ever had. He wanted to be at Penn State. You want to be one of the best offensive linemen, one of the best players to ever come through Penn State. Drew, this guy was holding film sessions throughout the fall, and I believe in the spring when he was there with his teammates in his dorm room. You talk about it like a maniacal type of hunger for the game. You add that with the fact that this guy could probably play 5 different positions on the offensive line. It sounds like James Franklin has one of his next best offensive linemen that it's early, but for good reason we're pretty excited about.
Yeah, forget EA Sports 2025. Just fire up the old Exos and work through some modern day simulations there. Now that's interesting to hear. Cooper, my lasting image of Cooper Cousins, same name as you, how thick his neck was. Like it was so thick, huge traps. I mean, he just looked like someone that was destined to play in the Big Ten. You said it, the position flex right there. You look at Penn State's too deep on the offensive line. Jevin Williams, a former 5-star there, kind of penciled in as one of the backup tackles. Again, just like with Kevin Haywood at Wisconsin, I think if you're a Penn State fan, you got to be fired up that Cooper Cousins is making this much noise. I don't think James Franklin is just blowing smoke or anyone else inside that building. They really believe in this individual. I think you can go ahead, write him down for the freshman All-American team. He's going to find a way to get on the field. And I think for Penn State, a blue-collar type of program, Cooper Cousins fits them to a T. He's a tough individual, lunch pail mentality, first in, first out, whatever cliche you want to use, he fits what the Nittany Lions want to do.
Another surprise, Tassir Denmark, the 3-star receiver as well. Also a guy getting some attention. You go down the list, Drew. Other notable standouts, Trey'Dez Green at LSU, number 2 tight end in the country. Ricardo Jones at Clemson. Obviously a twinkle in Dabo Sweeney's eye right now. And then Auburn, that young receiving core. We've heard a lot about Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson. What about Malcolm Simmons and Bryce Kane as well? Guys, stick around. More fall camp after this break. We're in the heat of fall camp, which means, guess what? We got hot takes abound, right? Our friend Chris Hummer putting out a great article at the beginning of every week. Chris Hummer's College Football Camp Report. You can find that at 247sports.com. And we're going to get to that. But, Drew, I think we wanted to touch on one of those guys that we mentioned in the last segment, Trey'Dez Green. I mean, you said something really spicy, maybe the spiciest thing that has been said on this show in its early infancy stages. Trey'Dez Green, Drew, the number 2 tight end in the country, you said kind of reminds you of somebody. Significant, by the way.
Now move over to Chris Hummer. I got a hot take here for you. He might be the closest thing to Kyle Pitts in the SEC, right? Remember Kyle Pitts at Florida had that magical season, parlayed it into the number 3 overall selection. It hasn't gone well on Sundays, but he was a cheat code for the Gators. I think Trey'Dez Green could be similar for the Tigers. And you think about it, Cooper, you said LSU's banged up at tight end. Well, Trey'Dez Green shows up. Mark McAway decides to enter the transfer portal. I think he saw what Trey'Dez Green could be. Talking about a guy that was on my annual freaks list, 6'5", 220 pounds. He had multiple Division I college basketball offers. Turn on the senior tape, a lot to like with his ball skills, over 900 yards receiving down in the boot. So, yes, I do think Trey'Dez Green could be like Kyle Pitts in the SEC.
All right, big freak there, Trey'Dez Green. And we love talking about freaks. And if you don't know anything about Andrew, he is the father of the freaks list, at least at the college football level. These guys coming out of high school. Nice transition into Noah Rogers, right? Because here's the quote in the hot take. A quote-unquote freak of nature at NC State, Noah Rogers, Drew, a guy that we were high on not too long ago, a top 50 prospect in the country and one of the best receivers, played 4 games as a freshman at Ohio State, transfers to the Wolfpack. Drew, I get excited about the idea of NC State. You got Grayson McCall coming over from Coastal Carolina, Kevin Concepcion, ACC Offensive Player of the Year as a freshman. You think about this team, they got to get better, a lot better passing. I think we're one of the worst in the country last year. But Concepcion coming back, like I said, you get Grayson McCall, all his experience, and then Noah Rogers, Drew. We talked about it. Even in that class of Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis, we thought Noah Rogers could be the best one. I love the fit here at NC State. I'm pretty jazzed up about this one.
Coop, remember, we couldn't stack those Ohio State wide receiver signees when they came in. And I think the consensus, and I heard this from someone in Columbus, is they thought Noah Rogers had the highest ceiling of the bunch when compared to Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis. So, yeah, this is a monster addition for the Wolfpack, who I think some people nationally might be sleeping on a little bit. I had a chance to see them play in the Pop-Tart Bowl up close and in person. I think if anyone there in Raleigh should be excited, it's KC Concepcion, right? Electric freshman season. Now he gets a a someone that can flank him, right? And Noah Rogers, what is he? He's a guy that can run the defense out. A vertical threat that defenses are going to have to account for on a snap-to-snap basis. I think that's going to open some things up for Concepcion. Coop, I'll say this on NC State. I think the key to their season is keeping Grayson McCall healthy. Remember, when he was at Coastal Carolina late in the year, dealt with a concussion. They don't have a lot of depth at quarterback. I did talk to someone there on the NC State staff, though. You'll like this. Cedric Bailey, true freshman quarterback. They also said he's a freak, right? He's put on some good weight. That was Jeremiah Smith's high school quarterback. Got the vibe that they think, if Grayson McCall had to come out for a game, Cedric Bailey could step in and create some magic. He had a long, I think, 60-yard touchdown run in the spring game.
We're in lockstep because I was getting ready to go off-road there, talk a little bit of CJ Bailey, which I know was a layup for you. I mean, that guy you studied, Jeremiah Smith's quarterback in high school. CJ Bailey, some good reviews already. I'm glad you brought that up. Grayson McCall, like you said, has a little bit of an injury history. If he can't go, they got a young guy they're pretty excited about. All right, Drew, let's keep it moving. We're going to stay in the ACC. Miami. How about this name? Akeem Mesidor. Only played 2 games last season, was a transfer from West Virginia, now at Miami with the Canes. And Drew, when he made his debut with Miami just 2 years ago, the guy had a pretty productive season, 10.5 tackles for loss, 7 sacks as well. Went back, watched the game tape from 2 games last year, Miami, Ohio, Texas A&M. What I love about this kid, and when you think about the idea of pairing him with the Tyler Barron coming over from Tennessee and a Rueben Owens, the position multiplicity in terms of what this guy can do. You can play him standing up. You can play 3 technique. You can play the 1 technique, allowing Miami and Lance Guidry to put their best athletes on the field, especially in pass rush situations. If this guy can stay healthy this year, this is a big, big amplifier for a pretty aggressive Miami front 7.
Coop, let me ask you this, right? When we've talked about Miami and you read the national magazines, you see the different shows, listen to the podcasts. It's all about Cam Ward and him potentially unlocking things for Mario Cristobal in a critical year. I'm going to throw this back to you. What is the strength of Miami? Is it the offense or the defense? Because I think that front 7, I think they're 4 deep across the board. And that's not even really words coming from me. That's someone inside the building that said that. Asking them about spring camp, or preseason camp, how is it going? They said, we are loaded on the defensive front. And the guy they highlighted was Akeem Mesidor. They think he's an absolute animal up front, should help Rueben Owens, some of those other individuals run free back there. So Cam Ward or the front 7, which is more important for Miami?
Point of attack, right? It wouldn't be a Mario Cristobal-led team if it wasn't the point of attack that was going to get the most emphasis. And on both sides of the ball, you got Jalen Rivers, you got Francis Malino, the 2 bookend tackles. They brought in some help at the center position from Carpenter coming over from Indiana to replace Matt Lee. I like what they've done defensively. Offensive line, I never really, when I put my head on the pillow when I worked for Mario, I never really worried about it. Defensive line on the other end, what they've been able to do at Miami to be able to address that front. Jason Taylor, I think one of the savviest hires that Mario Cristobal has made in his coaching career, is paying huge dividends. And then you go out on the transfer portal, you're able to kind of see the best of both worlds, the combination of what you're able to do with homegrown talent and a guy like Rueben Owens, and then go out there and get some transfers like Mesidor and the likes of Tyler Barron as well. So, the other thing, Drew, like one of the games that I watched with Mesidor was Texas A&M. Miami was flying to the football. The way they pursue point of attack, and you want to talk about like culture and where it starts, it all starts with those effort plays. Could they be better than they were last year? Absolutely. But I think Lance Guidry is certainly incorporating a culture on that side of the ball. So I'm fired up about Miami. Also fired up about that dude on the other side of the ball, Cam Ward. A lot of people picking Miami in the ACC this year, maybe as a playoff pick as well. They come in at, number 20 or something like that in the first AP poll. Hopefully we'll get to that later. All right, Drew, let's talk Colorado. First time we've talked Rado on this show. Cardell Thomas, you remember that name? Former 5-star Cardell Thomas from Southern Lab right there in Baton Rouge, the journeyman. Started his career at LSU, then transferred to Florida A&M. Well, guess what, Drew? He's now with Colorado. Colorado with a huge influx of transfer portal talent on their offensive line. It's going to be interesting to see where Cardell Thomas kind of fits. Drew, I guess you're just reaction to this. Is it something? Is it nothing? Is it something in between?
I think it just speaks to where Colorado is at as a program heading into the season. This is nothing against Cardell Thomas, a guy that has dealt with injuries, has rebounded and resurrected his career. He did that this past season at Florida A&M. Cooper, Cardell Thomas was in the same recruiting class as Derek Stingley, who was the number one ranked recruit in Louisiana back then. Stingley has started 20 games in the NFL. Cardell Thomas was at the opening. Some of the other players there, Garrett Wilson, Kyle Hamilton, and George Pickens, they're all entering, year 2 in the league. I look at the offensive line. I look at the roster for Prime and the Buffs. And yes, there is some star power at some key positions. But that offensive line, that O-line, it looks like it came out of the movie The Replacements. I mean, it's a bunch of transfers. And I know they had to get better after giving up 53 sacks last season. I can't get excited about this group. I mean, 11 new bodies, so 10 transfers, a 5-star in Jordan Seaton. How is this unit going to gel? And the fact that they're adding Cardell Thomas 3 weeks before they play a game, that should be a major concern because Cardell Thomas only has 1 year of eligibility. It's not like this is a guy you're going to stash on the practice squad and let him play his way into a spot. Very alarming to me. That Cardell Thomas is joining that group, and I don't think Colorado's offensive line is going to be better here in 2024.
Can you blame them, though? They gave up 56 sacks a year ago. That is second worst in all of college football. This team starts and ends with Shedeur Sanders and obviously keeping him healthy along with Travis Hunter. Drew, they are certainly very talented on the perimeter in the backfield as well. They have what you want at the skill and mid-skill positions. Colorado's success is all going to hinge up front. That's what it comes down to. I went back, I watched some tape from Cardell Thomas, started a couple games at LSU a few years ago. He can get you out of the game. At best, I think he's a winnable player, probably like a winnable minus player. But at guard, I think you get the idea of what they're trying to do there. And, I think that's the other thing. They can only go up, right? This is one of the worst units in all of college football. All right, Drew. Lastly, Tyler Van Dyke, quote unquote, gaining some momentum in Madison, right? And this is a guy that had a lot of high expectations. Mario Cristobal certainly came out hot when he said that he thought he was one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Couple up and down years for Tyler Van Dyke. Obviously, I think the confidence is a big thing here at the quarterback position. Phil Longo, Luke Fickell, Drew, they certainly have their plate full trying to rebuild Tyler Van Dyke, getting him back to the quarterback they think he can be. Your takeaway just on at least what we've heard behind the scenes, Van Dyke perceptionally trending in the right direction.
Cooper, he's got a ton of doubters out there, right? You know who also had a ton of doubters not too long ago? Guy named Graham Mertz, who had a sneaky good season at Florida in 2023. And I think he's going to be drafted, Graham Mertz, next spring. Not saying Tyler Van Dyke is Graham Mertz, but they were both, heralded recruits coming out that turned it around. I always go back to that Texas A&M game for TVD, right? 374 yards, 5 touchdowns against the Aggies. I'm excited to see what he's able to do there in Madison, but not surprised that they are settling or potentially settling in him being the starter.
All right, not just all about stars of today, it's about stars of tomorrow on this show as well. 5 stars flying off the board. We'll hit that next. Make sure to stay tuned. Drew, you hear that buzz? You hear that buzz in the background? What is that? That's Georgia Tech and Brent Key with a top 25 class. Man, that was cheesy. Appreciate you guys sticking with me there. Josh Petty, Drew, the number 14 player in the top 247, number 2 offensive tackle from the state of Georgia. Guess what? He is just committed to the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, who now have a top 25 class. They also play in week 0 in Dublin against Florida State. And Drew, it brings up the point. Brent Key, if you haven't been paying attention, Georgia Tech, they're actually doing some things there, not only in the high school side, but via the transfer portal as well. They bring over Dalen Pinson, another guy that we like in the top 247, Hazen Heidel, an offensive lineman. Georgia Tech, Drew, I think we always look at Georgia Tech as one of those jobs. Maybe there's a ceiling on it, and I think that's probably pretty clear logic. But Brent Key, in terms of kicking the tires and bringing Georgia Tech into the new era of college football, you have to love the aggressiveness there. I don't know the last time Georgia Tech signed a 5-star, but Josh Petty, a pretty good start here, Drew.
Yeah, Coop. Josh Petty, if the rankings hold, right, and we got the senior seasons to play, he'd be the second highest ranked signee ever for the Yellow Jackets. The guy ahead of him, Calvin Johnson, he's pretty good at football. Josh Petty would be ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs, who started his career in Atlanta before making his way to Alabama and then off to the NFL. No, this is a huge addition. And Cooper, you think about the ACC, right? The Power Four conferences, all this movement, teams heading different places. We don't know what's going to happen with Clemson and Florida State. But why are we sleeping on Georgia Tech? It's right there, in the heart of really football country. It's an easy flight. I think Brent Key is doing an excellent job of talent acquisition, not only from the high school ranks, but the transfer portal as well. I mean, take a look at that roster, what they have, and what you're going to see in week 0. Haynes King at quarterback, Christian Leary, a wide receiver. It's a fun group. Romello Height, the edge rusher. I like it. I'm excited. And then, the prospect Josh Petty, I'm sure there's some people looking out there, whoa, Georgia Tech getting a top 20 player. Look, other programs were certainly interested in Josh Petty. Now, the big question with him is, how big can he get, right? He's a lean individual, but he's a state champion wrestler in the 285-pound weight class. Coop, I was telling you, I think I saw him play the first game of his junior season 51 weeks ago, so almost a year ago, and he was a two-way player, and I love how aggressive he is, how nasty he is. I think if he was a defensive lineman, right, that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to rush the quarterback. He'd be a top 247 prospect for us, so huge addition for the Yellow Jackets, and they're doing an excellent job in the Peach State.
We talk about traditional recruiting going up against modern college football recruiting, NIL, transfer portal, et cetera, et cetera. Here's a nice tidbit from our Tom Loy on Josh Petty, a quote that he had about landing at Georgia Tech. He said, "I want to thank them for their consistency. They were there from the beginning. They were my first offer. They were so consistent with texting me and calling me. They were consistent. It's been impressive." And I think that just goes to show, Drew, right? That first offer used to be a big deal. I think nowadays people say it's all about the money. There's still a little bit lingering of a feeling of doing things the right way. If you're Brent Key, you can't afford not to do things the right way. In this case, Josh Petty, it earns him one of the most highly touted players that this program is in line to sign for the first time in a long time. Drew, Josh Petty, the number 2 offensive tackle in the land. How about the number 1? He still hasn't committed yet. Well, he's going to commit right here on the 247 Sports YouTube channel this weekend on Saturday, 1:15 Eastern Time. That is David Sanders from Providence Day in North Carolina. He's been busy the last couple years protecting the blind side of Jaden Davis, now with the Michigan Wolverines. Drew, we've talked about it, how hard it is to go wire to wire just in the top 100 when those early rankings come out. David Sanders has been one of those guys that I think we felt and feel convicted in for quite some time. He's getting ready to make his decision. The hat's on the table. Georgia, Ohio State, Tennessee, in Nebraska. It seems like Tennessee and Nebraska have pulled away from the rest of the group. Those appear to be the 2 finalists. You never know. But Drew, just your thoughts on David Sanders, and then maybe we can get into a couple program fits as well.
Coop, he was our first 5-star in the 2025 cycle. Guy I saw, or a kid I should say, he was just a pup at that stage at the FBU Freshman All-American game. I was like, who is that? I need his name. Let's get him invited. And he was ranked super high. I think he's everything you want in a potential franchise left tackle. Kind of like with Josh Petty, it's going to take some time. How big can he get? But he is over 6'5". He's got some longer arms. And what jumps out to me is the reactionary skills. That is so important for a corner protector, right? How can you recover? How can you refortify? Because you're going to get beat, especially if you're playing in the Big Ten and in the SEC. You have to find and regain that advantage. I think David Sanders does it at an admirable level. Love the multi-sport background. He swims. He throws the shot and the discus, and he's a two-way player as well. Did it this past season for Providence Day, which won a state title. 38 quarterback pressures there. Did it with a torn labrum in his shoulder as well. So he's a tough kid. Love the total package with him. Longer burn, but man, the ceiling is super high. Reminds me of Charles Cross, who was a former first-round pick now with the Seattle Seahawks.
I like that comparison. The one that I had was Paris Johnson, now with the Arizona Cardinals, played his ball at Ohio State. I think the commonality there between Charles Cross and Paris Johnson, two guys in terms of developmental upside. You love the reactionary cat quickness, the foot, the body quickness, what you can get as a left tackle as a premier kind of pass protector. Drew, the biggest thing that kind of stood out to me, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Josh Connerly. Maybe not as burly, maybe not as strong, but it's going to take a year to really get that body right for David Sanders. Going to be a little bit of a slow burn, believe it or not, for a top 5 player in the country. Nebraska, Tennessee could be in good shape. Drew, let's get out of here on this one before we go to break. Texas, I mean, do they have one of the best receiver rooms in the country? They had 5-star Khalil Lockett this past week as well. We talked a little bit about him. Drew ranked number 12 in the country, believe it or not, the number 2 receiver as well. Ryan Wingo getting some buzz. Jonte Cook, Ryan Niblett, DeAndre Moore, Matthew Golden. You go down the list. Isaiah Bond. These dudes are stacked.
Coop, you've seen who's in that quarterback room there in Austin. And I think the other thing with Khalil Lockett, right, he reminds me of Jerry Jeudy. That is my player comp for him. Jerry Jeudy had a ton of success at Alabama when Steve Sarkisian was calling plays for 2 seasons. Khalil Lockett, excellent. You see it right there, going up and getting the football. Huge ceiling for him.
Texas, one of the most dynamic receiver rooms in the country. A lot to be excited about if you're a Longhorns fan. Stick around. We got final thoughts next. Is analytics coming to college football? That is the question that some are asking. At least they asked it at the Player Personnel Symposium last week here in Nashville. Well, Drew, it seems like Marcus Freeman, head coach of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, has an answer to that question as he has hired Anthony Treesh from Pro Football Focus as a director of analytics for Notre Dame. And Drew, I don't know. I don't know if it's the first of its kind, if it's already out there. I hadn't done the research on the rest of the other 133 teams in the FBS, but certainly a notable hire. Treesh, one of the top, personnel minds in Pro Football Focus's organization over the last couple of years. He's a graduate of Indiana University. I guess my biggest question is, what is a director of analytics in college football? What do they do? What's their day-to-day job like? What is their task? Are they in advanced scouting? Are they working in the transfer portal? I'm sure Treesh will be doing a lot of different things, wearing a lot of different hats. I don't think you can knock it, Drew. That's kind of my bottom line on this. Like, football is one of those things where it continues to evolve, a lot of twists and turns along the way. Marcus Freeman, his team, trying to get ahead of it.
Coop, we were at the Player Personnel Recruiting Symposium last week. 5th year of the event. Year 1, 125 people registered. Last week, over 700 there. The personnel space, off-field support staff, it is growing so much. I think Marcus Freeman is ahead of the curve here. I love the move, right? Analytics, you see this in pro sports all the time, and maybe some NFL teams are going to be kicking their tires for not hiring Anthony, but the NHL, they go out and they get the analytics guys. If it gives you an advantage and you have the funds to do it, and more teams are pouring funds into the personnel space, I'm all for it, fired up to see it. I think he is just the start.
If you can find some inefficiencies in the market, whether that's a transfer portal market, whatever it is, more power to you. The other thing, here's my biggest questions. Is this going to help you get guys like Dante Moore, Keon Keeley, Peyton Bowen, Justin Scott, Derek Meadows, and Deuce Knight? Probably not. But at the end of the day, I understand why they would make this move. Drew, the top 25 AP poll came out. Quick thoughts on this.
Michigan, lowest reigning national champion in the preseason AP poll since Auburn back in 2011. Auburn was 23, Michigan checking in at number 9.
Michigan, Penn State, right there ahead of them. All right, guys, like I said, you can find David Sanders, number 1 offensive tackle in the country, his commitment on the 247 Sports YouTube channel on Saturday, 1:15 Eastern, all those other great programs as well. For Andrew Ivins, I'm Cooper Petagna. Appreciate you guys joining us today. We'll see you next week.